If you're like me, who have been making homemade yogurt for years, have you ever asked yourself these questions? Are there different ways of making yogurt? What aspects would affect the texture and taste? Is fresh milk better than room temperature milk? Also a funky question, would spoons affect your palate? There's a lot that I'm going to answer today. Note that I use full-fat milk throughout the video, some using UHT or ultra-high temperature, and some pasteurized or fresh. To culture the milk, a starter is a must. This is yogurt I saved from the last batch, which was made from this organic plain yogurt 2 months ago. I recommend using organic yogurt, but if you can't, the key is to find something that contains live bacteria. First, let me show you my usual way of making yogurt. And from now on, let's call it the standard version. I have a yogurt maker at home, which holds a ceramic container of about 4.5 cups. Add 1 kilogram of milk to the container, then microwave it on medium-high for a few minutes till it registers 43 degrees. Then add 20 grams of yogurt starter and mix well. In modern times, the microorganisms to ferment yogurt are selected down to 2 species, Streptococcus thermophilus and Lactobacillus bulgarian. The two coexist and nurture each other in the first few hours of fermentation. When pH drops to a certain point, one bacterium outgrows the other, meanwhile causing the protein to coagulate, and the yogurt we're familiar with starts to form curd. After 8 hours, the yogurt still feels quite jiggly, like jelly. Immediately put it in the refrigerator to stop further fermentation. I recommend chilling it overnight. The yogurt seems to have set. To test the thickness, I'm going to place a dining spoon perpendicularly to the yogurt. Then carefully remove the hands and allow the gravitation to do the work. The spoon weighs about 60 grams, by the way. This is a way to test the thickness of the yogurt. If you make yogurt often and do the test all the time, you will be able to tell if your batch is consistent. The fresh-made yogurt, when unintervened, is called set yogurt or curd, which means you can just scoop and eat it. The set structure is supported by the network of casein macelle formed by the milk proteins, like that of a sponge, in between which mostly holds the yogurt whey. Usually, the top is the thickest, as the fat flows to the top. So, set yogurt in a way is not homogeneous. When intervened, the whey will leak out, and when vigorously stirred, the yogurt will become runnier, and this is called stirred yogurt. I think what it looks like after mixing is the real texture of the batch. Using this ratio, the yogurt should have a ribbon effect, which means the ribbon keeps its shape and it doesn't disappear for at least 40 seconds. That's the thickness I'm looking for. From there, save some batch, and the rest of which I'm gonna make whey. To make whey, I'll need to make Greek yogurt. The two are simultaneous. It's easier than you think. Just strain regular yogurt through a sieve with a muslin cloth lined underneath to separate the liquid. Depending on how much whey you want or how thick you want yogurt to be, the dripping takes from a few hours to a day. So do allow it to drip in the refrigerator. And after 12 hours, it can be served as a spreadable yogurt, replacing cream cheese. After straining, what's left is called yogurt whey. Now I'm going to show you how to make the yogurt out of the whey starter. This time, I'm going to use a jam jar, and I would emphasize using pasteurized milk for this version. Microwave the milk to about 85 degrees Celsius, then cool to 43, and then add 4.5 grams of whey. This time, I'm going to use the proofing machine, and to achieve the best result, I recommend 24 hours at a temperature of 43 degrees. Why so long? So this is 8 hours. The batch seems not fully set yet. And this is 18 hours. Still seems a little tender, and I'm not confident about it. So eventually, this is 24 hours. Still a bit jiggly, but much better. After chilling it in the refrigerator for about 8 hours though, the batch has all set. This one is like silky tofu, which is quite smooth on the top. And the spoon test is out of my expectation. And it's much firmer than I thought. A reminder is that the long hours are only necessary for the whey version. If you use yogurt as a starter, 8 hours is plenty. I do notice, though, that using heat-treated pasteurized milk tends to give yogurt a grainy texture, especially when blended in the beginning. But like all versions, it becomes smooth after a thorough mix. It has a good ribbon effect as well. Overall, I'm pleased with this version as it outperforms the others. However, it is slightly more sour than the standard version. If you have none of the electric equipment, one of the ways is to try the insulation bags. Note that my kitchen temperature fluctuates between 21 to 23 at the time of making. The bag can slow down the drop of temperature, but doesn't maintain it forever, so I'd use some props to create a warmer environment. Try to find some stuff made of heat-keeping materials like winter hats, towels, and even wool sweaters. If you want a better result, I recommend using the body heating pads to supply heat. This brand says it can last for 10 hours with an average temperature of 53 degrees. I would also prepare lingerie to stick the pad on it. To prepare, line a towel at the bottom of the bag and wrap another around the wall to make a center. For this version, I just use UHT for convenience. Heat 250 grams of milk to about 43 degrees. Then mix in 5 grams of the yogurt starter. Tighten the lid, put it into the hat, and tie it up. Place the hat into the center of the towel and tuck it in. Then take the pad out and stick to the lingerie, wrap it around, and then just place it on top of the hat. Put it back somewhere with a stable temperature at home. It's safe to say this batch will be fermented at unstable temperatures, so I recommend 24 hours. At room temperature, you may only use the heating pad once, but to achieve a better result, change it every 8 hours. After being chilled in the refrigerator overnight, let's do the spoon test. By its performance, this batch looks similar to the standard version. It has set well and also looks creamy. This is the best out of 3 tests for this method. My suggestion is, if you don't have the heating pads, you can use tightly sealed hot water, but may need to change more frequently. Or if you don't want to use any temperature regulator, just increase the starter volume to 13.3%. However, my test result shows it's a little thinner and not as tangy, unlike this heating pad version, which has the opposite result. Another energy-saving way is to use Thermos. That is, if you have one. This is an almost 2-cup sized container, but to compare, I'll just make about 1 cup. For this method, UHT milk is good enough. First, warm up the container by adding 75-degree water almost to the top. Then seal the lids and put it aside. Next, heat 225 grams of milk in a separate container, and when it reaches a little higher than 46 degrees, drain the water in the container and dry it with a clean paper towel. Immediately add the milk to the container. If the temperature registers between 45 to 46 degrees, mix in 13.3% of the yogurt starter. At this point, the temperature of this batch shows 42.4 degrees. Seal the lids and put the thermos somewhere safe in the kitchen that won't be knocked over. After 24 hours, it seems to have set, but the top is not smooth, and I can't tell if the liquid on the top is separated away or water dropped from the lid. Anyway, let's check again after it's fully chilled in the refrigerator. The top is kind of leathery and quite grainy, but after a good mix, the texture becomes smooth again, and the ribbon effect is comparable to the standard version. I'm quite happy with the texture, but it is the most sour version of all. So if you prefer a less sour taste, you may need to decrease the fermentation to 18 hours, but the texture will be different. So what's the difference between using UHT and pasteurized milk? Here is the experiment. I tested 4 jars with 2 heat treatments. Let's call them low heat and high heat from now on. They all use a yogurt starter and have been refrigerated for 8 hours. I first inserted a butter knife to test how solid each yogurt is, but let's see it again with a dessert spoon. The spoon is slightly lighter than the butter knife, but judging by the results, it's consistent with the butter knife test. Here is a close look at the 2 spoons on the right. Obviously, the high heat pasteurized is the thickest, and the low heat pasteurized is the thinnest. While mixing, the high heat pasteurized is the only grainy version, not attractive in the beginning, but also becomes smooth after a 1-minute mix. Low heat UHT has a ribbon effect of at least 40 seconds, while none for the pasteurized. High heat UHT stays longer, and the pasteurized is the thickest. Visually, the high heat pasteurized is also the coarsest. Lastly, of course, rounds of taste tests, even with different spoons. In general, UHT is more sour than pasteurized. Specifically, the high heat UHT is most sour. The low heat UHT is the next. And then high heat pasteurized, although I think these two are quite close. And the low heat pasteurized has little flavor, kind of too bland for me. in terms of which milk to use, low-heat pasteurized is surely out. High-heat UHT also has little point under comparison, but it's for you to decide. Low-heat UHT overall is balanced between texture, taste, and convenience. So this is my go-to milk, but under some conditions, high-heat pasteurized is irreplaceable. So how much starter to use? The 3 jars all used low-heat UHT milk and were fermented under the same conditions. The only difference is the percentage of yogurt added. The spoon test result is an eye-opener, as the thickness doesn't seem to increase by volume. The 13.3% is quite grainy, either by spooning or first mixing. Comparing the ribbon effect, 2% is much better than the middle one and slightly better than the highest one. But here's a fun fact. When feeling the resistance when mixing yogurt, the force actually increases when the percentage decreases. In terms of the taste, it's interesting too. Those two actually taste quite similar, while the one in the middle is way tangier. So, do different spoons affect taste? I tasted several rounds and washed my mouth with water in between, checked uncertainties over and over again, and unfortunately, I don't have a conclusion. If there is a difference, I think it's more psychological and may be affected by the order of tasting. So the answer is, I don't know, but I don't think so. That's all for this episode. I hope you find the test useful and see you next time.